Bright, I'm doing very well by His grace.
Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning to our listeners in and around Winneba, and especially all our level 300 students taking the course Trends in Education and School Management in Ghana. This is a radio lecture coming to you from the Department of Educational Foundations. And as I said, the course Trends in Education and School Management in Ghana. Today, as the introduction has already been done, our topic for discussion is strategic decision making, the meaning of it. So, the meaning of strategic decision making. And to contextualize it the more, we're looking at strategic decision making in educational management and administration. So, in as much as we look at the broader context of strategic management, we will be zeroing in more into educational administration and management. So basically, our objective is to ensure that our listeners and students are able to comprehend and demonstrate knowledge of strategic decision making in various organizations, especially or most especially in educational institutions. So, what will be our outline for this discussion? First, we'll look at the meaning of decision making. Then we move on to the meaning of strategic decision making. Then the strategic decision making process. We'll just go over this because the strategic decision making process will be a full topic for discussion, hopefully next week. So we'll just go through it as part of this discussion. Then we'll also look at the relevance of strategic decision making to educational management and administration, and also identify some of the strategic decision makers in education and all other relevant issues that comes along as we go along with the discussions. So, my dear students, let's please zoom in straight to our discussion. And the first question will be, what is decision making? What is decision making? I mean, the lives of individuals, communities, societies, nations, the world over, we keep making decisions day in and day out. In fact, some authorities in administration and management say that management or administration is all about making a decision. And yes, as individuals, we wake up in the morning by the grace of God and we are confronted with various choices and actions to be taken. And that definitely means that there are decisions that we need to make in every step of the way. I mean, some of these decisions, in as much as they might be routine in nature, even in its routineness, you still have to be making some choices in there. Although they are actions that you take daily, and some also come unknowingly, and so as we move along, we continue to make decisions. So that makes it very important for us to understand decision making and be able to apply it in our individual capacities and also in our professional endeavors. Now, the term decision making, of course, like any other concept, authorities do not agree on a definite definition. However, there are some that comes up, and at a point in time, there are points of agreement. So first, according to O'Sullivan 2011, it said decisions are often described and understood as conscious, conscious, deliberate choices made by an individual at the end of a process conventionally assumed to be of a rational nature. So he sees decisions as conscious, deliberate choices made by an individual at the end of a process conventionally assumed to be of rational in nature. O'Sullivan's description or definition of decision points to a certain kind or type or model of decision making, which generally is accepted as the best type of decision making, and that is, the rational decision making. So I am quick to note that yes, in as much as we see rational decision making as the best, it is not the only model. There are other models of decision making, but per O'Sullivan's definition, it points to the rational decision making model. So it's emphasized the fact that it's a conscious, deliberate choice that individuals make at the end of a process, and these processes are referred to as being rational in nature. Rational in nature. Now, Hoy and Tata also saw decision making as rational, deliberative, purposive action. Rational, deliberative, purposive action, beginning with the development of a decision strategy. Rational, deliberative, purposive action. Rational, deliberative, purposive action or purposeful action, beginning with the development of a decision strategy and moving through implementation and appraisal of results. So Tata's definition adds on to that of O'Sullivan, where O'Sullivan emphasized on conscious, deliberate choices made by an individual at the end of a process conventionally assumed to be of rational nature. Hoy and Tata also confirm or emphasize the rational and deliberative as well as purposive nature of decision making. But he or they add that it begins with a decision strategy, moving through implementation, and then appraisal of results. So Hoy and Tata emphasize that decision making does not end at making the choice, but it also involves the implementation of what choice any individual or organization makes, and also get to the point of appraising the choice or the decisions that were made. Then the last definition that we'll add is by Scott and Bruce, 1995, who says that decision making is the learned habitual response pattern. Learned habitual response pattern exhibited by an individual when confronted with a decision situation. A learned habitual response pattern. So get to a point that you take some decisions. It may not necessarily go through a systematic process, but there are some reflexes, experiences that you have you have come across over the period or in your life or within the organization, and then it gets to some point that you need to take a decision in a split of a second. Now, the learned habitual process or response will now come to play for you to be able to take a decision in this context. And so this also gives us another dimension of decision making. Right, so having gotten this background of decision making, the meaning of decision making, then when we put all of them together, we will realize that by nature, decision making is a choice between alternatives. A decision making arises when there are alternatives, when you need to make an alternative. That is one of the nature of decision making. 2, it has an intended purpose. It has an intended purpose. So this simply implies that making a decision or decision making is aimed at achieving some purposes. There should be a target for that decision. And then just as the first two definitions pointed to, decision making is rational and a deliberate effort. So pointing more to the rational decision making model. It is, so when we say it is rational and deliberate effort, then it means that it is an intellectual process supported by sound reasoning and judgment. So the rational model makes decision making more scientific in nature. And that is why within the rational decision making, it goes through a process which we will currently go through that. So it is supported by sound reasoning. It is something you can actually explain, give reasons to, and at the end of the day, judge that decision. Right. So yes, let me go through this again. So by nature, decision making is a choice between alternatives. That is 1. 2, it is an intended purpose. It is a deliberate action. And then 3, it is a rational effort. It is an intellectual process supported by sound reasoning and judgment. So now, having understood the meaning of decision making, then let's now move on to the meaning of strategic decision making. So I believe that now we have at the background that decision making generally has to do with making a choice between two or among alternatives. Now, in the 21st century, as an individual, as an organization, as a nation, in every decision that we take, we need to be strategic in nature. We need to be strategic in nature. And in educational administration and management, it even requires more strategies to be able to live up to expectations. So strategic decision making refers to the process by which educational leaders make long-term, high impact decisions that shape the future of institutions. So the key word here is long-term and high impact. So whatever choice that you are making among the alternatives, you are looking at it beyond the present. But as you are being strategic, then you are looking at the long term, living beyond the lives of the people or the individual making that decision. And as an individual, whatever decision that you take that is strategic in nature, then it means that you are looking at the long term. And so sometimes you make certain decisions and people will not understand the relevance of that decision at the present. But as a visionary person, you take these decisions because it is not to solve only current problems, but at the long run, solve other problems that will come along. So, strategic decision making refers to the process by which educational leaders and leaders in general make long-term, high-impact decisions that shape the future of institutions. So, in making such long-term decisions, it involves aligning the institutional goals with stakeholder needs and available resources. Aligning institutional goals. So, what are the goals as established by the organization, and what are the needs of its stakeholders? So, in the case of a school, what are the needs of its key stakeholders? Learners, parents, teachers, other workers, the communities. So how are you aligning the goals of the institution to produce high quality human resource for the building of the society or the nation? How are you aligning this goal with what stakeholders need and the available resource? Strategic decision making. And so when we look at the foundations of the concept strategic, we've looked at decision making, actually making a choice between alternatives. Okay, and we talked about the fact that it has to do with the long-term, making long-term and high-impact decisions that shape the future of an organization. So when we look at the foundations of the concept, then you see another key word there, strategy. Strategy. And so if you are strategizing, what are you doing? What is a strategy? In ancient times, it was more used by the military. So before they move on into wars, they strategize. And what is it? It is a plan of action designed to achieve a long-term or overall aim. A plan of action to achieve a long-term or overall aims. Right, so this brings us to the question as so what are the types of decisions? In as much as we are talking about strategic decisions, we have operational decisions, which has to do with routine and decisions that are to ensure the day-to-day running of an organization. And then we also have what we call the tactical decisions. And then we have the strategic decisions that we are discussing. Right, so strategy is a plan of action designed to achieve a long-term goal. So when we take decisions and we take strategic decisions, then we are talking about the process by which leaders, managers, administrators make long-term, high-impact decisions that shape the future of the organizations.
Windy Bay 98.3
So
FM.
the decision-making process or the strategic decision-making process, like I said, I will just mention this in passing because this will be a full topic for discussion next week. But first you go through, you have to identify the problem, then you gather information, and in this information gathering, you'll be looking at various alternatives to address the challenge or the goal that you've set up. And then once you have these alternatives, you need to evaluate them. And after evaluating, you come to the conclusion of making the choice. And after making the choice, I think that when we cast our mind back to the earlier definitions that we had, you realize that the first two definitions of decision making will end at making a choice. But with the subsequent definition that was added, you realize that it goes beyond making a choice. And so in the decision-making process, the fourth step, which is making a choice, is followed by implementation. And then after or during implementation, you monitor and evaluate. So it's a process because it goes step by step, and it becomes a cycle. Because if you looked at the fact that if you get to the point that, or you evaluate and come to the conclusion that the problem you identified earlier or the goal you set for yourself earlier, for the organization earlier, and the decisions, the choices that you've made are not solving the problem, then means that you have to go back to look at your problem identification or the goal or purpose you set for yourself, and then go through the process again. So that is the decision-making process. Right. So what is the relevance of strategic decision-making to educational management, educational leadership, educational administration? One, it guides institutional vision. It guides institutional vision. So as you develop your vision and your mission, if you are taking decisions strategically, it will guide whatever vision that as an organization that you have. So as I always make this example or give this example, the University of Education Winneba envisaged to be a reputable international educational institution. International educational institution. All right. So if the university aims at becoming a reputable international higher institution for education, then presently whatever decisions that are being taken in terms of teaching and learning, in terms of infrastructure, will have to feed into achieving this long-term vision. And so that is the key relevance of strategic decision making. Right. So our moderator this morning actually mentioned this edifice of the Student Center. And I mean, in the process of getting to the vision of becoming one of the best or the best institution that provide teacher education in the world, I think that this was a strategic decision that was taken to have a well-encompassed structure that deals with all issues that are concerned with the major stakeholders of any academic institution, and that is our students.
Windy Bay.
98.3
strategic
strategic decision makings also influence teaching and learning. So, what are the pedagogies, the strategies that are required or needed in the future or as long term for the institution to grow? So that is the second relevance. Now, the third one has to do with aligning human and material resources. Aligning human and material resources. So, as you take this long-term decision, you're looking at the material resources that are available and then aligning them with the human resource. Right. So these are basically the general relevance, but not limited to this. We can explore more. It guides institutional vision. It influences teaching and learning, and align human and material resources. So, who are the strategic decision makers in our educational institutions? So, yes, we have the Ministry of Education, case of Ghana, all right, that represents the government that takes strategic decisions for the educational sector. I mean, when we come to the implementers, we also have the Ghana Education Service, who in implementing decisions that are taken by the ministry, also in the process of implementation, make strategic decisions. We come to our regional levels of education management, and then we come to the institutional level. So heads of institution, like the vice chancellor, headmasters, headmistress, head teachers. We come to deans, heads of department, directors, heads of various units, coordinators, officers at various points take or make strategic decisions. So when we look at those who make strategic decisions in our educational institutions, you see that this can be it is either centralized or shared or decentralized. That is, the decision-making process is now moved to lower levels, or it moved through the lower levels as well. All right. So that is the individuals or people or the stakeholders in strategic decision-making in education. Now, what are the key characteristics of strategic decisions? Key characteristics. So yes, it is long-term in focus. That is one. Long-term in focus. Sometimes between 3-5 years and above. So you take these decisions. And if we all understand strategic decision making, and decisions are made strategically, and we have strategic plans, that will actually enhance our developmental process in all sectors of the economy, including education. So, for instance, in the last convocation meeting that was held, the Vice Chancellor emphasized that currently no new projects are going to be embarked on, but the focus is to complete existing projects. And I think that is very important and phenomenal, because it is a strategic decision over a period of time that is taken. And so once we have another group or another leader taking over and ensuring that these decisions that were taken, that were long-term in nature, are being continued and complete, it goes a long way to achieve the long-term vision of the organization. And I think that is what, as a people, as a nation, we need to strive for. We are all witnesses to some of these situations whereby a government or successive government take over and we have a lot of abandoned projects. Once these long-term decisions are made, we need to strive to complete them. So it is long-term in focus. It is also highly complex when you are taking a long-term decision or strategic decision. It is quite complex because when you look through strategic plans, it has to do with a lot of decisions, allocations, and the rest. And it is also a high impact venture because of its long term nature. And then finally, strategic decision making require significant resource allocation. Yes, so when you are taking a long term decision, it requires more in terms of resources, human, material, financial, and the rest. Right. So, in the Ghanaian system, we have an example like the Ghana's Education Strategic Plan 2018 to 2030, and that deals with expanding access, improving quality, enhancing equity. All right. And this is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals and National Education Goals. And through this, there are various cases or there are various decisions that are taken. Right. Now, in dealing with strategic decisions, as we've mentioned, it implies resource allocation decisions. Resource allocation decisions. And we have strategic choices on budget use, teaching and learning, resources distribution, staffing priorities. We also have leadership and strategic decisions. Now, effective leadership supports school performance improvement planning, collaborative goal setting. And then strategic decision making also involves data-driven decision making. Data-driven decision making. So, for instance, in through the Ministry of Education and the Ghana Education Service, we have the Education Management Information Systems (EMIS), where relevant data about education in the country, budget, resource distribution, everything is managed by this system. And so when you are taking a strategic decision, you can, the ministry and the Ghana Education Service and other individuals within the education sector will fall or can fall on this. We also have the national assessment data, and then we have the WASI and BEC performance. All these are data that we can fall on when we are making strategic decisions in education. Right. Now, the stakeholders that we've mentioned already, I mean, they include teachers, students, parents, non-governmental organization, religious bodies. All these group play important role when it comes to strategic decision making, and it also enhances transparency and legitimacy. I mean, once these people, there's stakeholder involvement in decision making, you realize that it is seen as something part of them. They own it up, and that enhances transparency and legitimacy. Finally, in taking strategic decisions, there are certain barriers to strategic decision making. What are these? We have bureaucracy, so structures you need to go through, a lot more of formal structures which sometimes delay some of these decision making or these decisions. Politicization, I mean, the moment there is some politicization, it also becomes a barrier. I did not start this, so I will not continue. And I want to do something that will be attributed to me. This is a barrier to strategic decision making. If you don't have the relevant data, poor data, good data, that also becomes a barrier to decision making, strategic decision making. And then the generally resource limitation also becomes a barrier. Right. So, listeners, it is still the radio lecture on Radio Windy Bay 98.3 FM, and the topic is the meaning of strategic decision making. Our phone lines are activated already. 050-392-3158 is the same line for WhatsApp. 050-392-3158. We are streaming live on the university website www.uu.edu.gh, and we are also on Facebook, Radio Windy Bay 98.3 FM. We will now pause for your comments, your questions, and then we'll continue. Thank you very much. We are back, and it's radio lecture on 98.3 FM Radio Windy Bay. The program is Radio Lecture, and it's coming to you from the Department of Educational Administration, the Department of Educational Foundations. You know, that is my mother department, so forgive me for that. That yes, coming from me from the Department of Educational Foundations, and the topic is strategic decision making. We'll be going through the meaning of decision making, strategic decision making, the relevance of strategic decision making. We have some messages, Facebook. So we have NS Bafu Bonnie. He said we are alive and live. And then we have Alex Bacha. He said live from Ate to North Campus. And then we have Philip watching live from South Campus, UW.
This is Radio Windy Bay. Windy Bay, 98.3
Right.
FM. Windy Bay.
Yes, so the studio lines 050-392-3158, 050-392-5158 is same as WhatsApp. We're streaming live on the university website, www.uu.edu.gh, and we're also on Facebook, Radio Windy Bay 98.3 FM. As we wait for your comments, your questions, let's please go through the discussions one again. We're looking at the meaning of decision making, and generally we say that by nature, decision making is a choice between alternatives. And then we also say that it is an intended purpose. This implies that decision making is aimed at achieving some purposes or a specific purpose. Then we have the fact that decision making is rational and a deliberate effort. That means that it is an intellectual process that is supported by sound judgment and reasoning. Then with this, we also talked about the meaning of strategic decision making, which refers to the process by which leaders make long-term, high-impact decisions that shape the future of institutions. And this involves aligning the institutional goals with stakeholder needs and available resources. So it is strategic because it is designed to achieve a long-term or overall aims or goals. And we have, apart from strategic decisions, we have operational, we have tactical decisions. We also ran through quickly the strategic decision-making process, where we said that you identify the problem, you gather information, evaluate alternatives, make a choice, you implement and monitor and evaluate. Strategic decision making are relevant to education management and administration because it guides institutional vision, it influences teaching and learning, and align human and material resources. In our education system, the strategic decision makers include the Ministry of Education, the Ghana Education Service, regional district directors, heads of institution, various leaders or various individuals that play leadership roles in the educational system. Strategic decision making is long-term in focus. It is highly complex. It has a high impact and require significant resource allocation. In Ghana, the strategic planning system involves the Ghana Educational Strategic Plan that focuses on expanding access, improving quality, and enhancing equity. And these are aligned with the sustainable development goals and national education goals as well. In strategic decision making, we have what we call leadership and strategic decisions. So, leadership supports or effective leadership supports school improvement planning, and of course, this has to do with strategic leadership. It also supports collaborative goal setting. Again, strategic decision making, as we said, involves resource allocations decisions and with the focus of long term. So, development of budget, teaching and learning resource distribution, staffing priorities. So, what are the human resource requirements? It also involves data-driven decision making. So as I mentioned, so for instance, we have the education management information system, which is a system that gathers, analyzes, and come out with relevant information that will help in decision making. We have national assessment data, we have the WASI and BECA performance, all these sources of data that the Ghana education system use in making strategic decisions. So individual institutions can also fall on various sources of data to make decisions. And as we said, strategic decision making can be centralized and also decentralized. So we have the district assemblies, the education oversight committees, and the rest also taking part in decision making. Stakeholder involvement is also very key when it comes to decision making. So teachers making strategic decisions. So we have teachers, we have learners, parents, non-governmental organizations, religious bodies, other business organizations are all stakeholders that needed to be involved in strategic decision making. And then we finally looked at some of the barriers to strategic decision making. So we have bureaucracy, it has to go through a lot of process, steps, seek for approval, and the rest before you can make such strategic decision. Politicization is also in there as a barrier. If you don't have the relevant data, poor data is also a barrier, and also resource limitations. Yeah, so this has been our discussion. Our phone lines are still opened. It is still for WhatsApp as well as SMS 050 392 3158. 050 392 3158. We are on Facebook, Radio Windy Bay 98.3 FM, and also streaming live on the university website www.uw.edu.gh. and that is Minister Chris, the ASOC president, says he's listening to us live. Thank you, Minister Chris, for listening to us.
FM.
Right, so we'll do a wrap up. Yes, so the topic has been strategic decision making, and it has been concluded that strategic decision making refers to the process by which leaders make long-term and high-impact decisions that shape the future of institutions. And in making this, you align the institutional goals with stakeholder needs and available resources. This is very relevant in all sectors, as well as the education sector, education management, because it guides the institutional vision and influence teaching and learning, as well as align human and material resources. At all levels, we have various individual or key individuals that are involved in strategic decision making. And in the structure in Ghana, we can talk about the Ministry of Education, the Ghana Education Service, regional directors, district directors, heads of institutions, departmental heads, deans of faculties, and the rest. Let's also note that the moment we mention strategic decision making, it has certain key characteristics. One of them is that it is long-term in focus. It is a high complex activity because you need to do, as we go through or we mention the process, you identify a problem, generate alternatives, now make a choice, implement, monitor, evaluate. So making a strategic decision is quite complex. And its impact is also very high once it's achieved the purpose. And it requires significant resource allocation. Yes, so we have various kinds of strategic decisions that have been made over the years. And as I mentioned, one example in Ghana has to do with the education strategic plan, ESP 2018 to 2030. Strategic decision making involves leadership and strategic decisions that supports planning. It also involves resource allocation decisions. It also involves data-driven decision making. And decisions are either decentralized or centralized. Decision or strategic decision making has to do with stakeholder involvement. So because it's very impactful and long-term in nature, you need to bring all those who are directly and indirectly affected in the sector involved to make their input. Let's also remember that there are some barriers to strategic decision making. These include, but not limited to this, bureaucracy, politicization, poor data, and resource limitations. So listeners, students, strategic decision making is vital for any enterprise, including effective educational governance in Ghana and all over the world. And as I always say, as individuals, as we are making decisions, let's be strategic in nature. Let's take decisions that will affect positively, impactful, or be impactful on our future endeavors. Have some influence on, positive influence on our future endeavors. Let's also ensure that we do proper stakeholder analysis in making these long-term decisions. And once we do that in the education sector, in wherever leadership role that we find ourselves, it will foster accountability, responsiveness, and long-term improvement. Thank you very much for your audience, and hope to meet you another time.